I think it's good. Some fresh blood. No, 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 no. No, that's good. That's good at this point. Sorry, I'd rather look at the larger frame and because that you don't need to. That was not the expectation. I think you were asked as a youth researcher. Yes. Youth researcher. First day. Yeah, today it's good. We had a meeting here last week and it was so hot in here because the air condition is there, but now we can open the door because then it was cold outside. Now it was kind of it was raining and it was wet. Okay.
interessant werden, gibt es oder nicht?
Jetzt ist an.
Da muss man jetzt den Knopf drücken. Ah, doch. Ah, das leuchtet. Aha. Also so. Und das muss rot sein. Gut.
You have to press this button. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Vienna, and we're very happy that you all made it today to our Ray Triangular Summit, which we're ready to kick off. My name is Alexandra Beweis. I'm from Austria. I'm a youth worker, and I'm in international networks. That's where I'm active. And I give the floor to Özge to introduce himself.
Hi, welcome to Austria, Vienna. I'm Özgehan, and together with Alex, we will be trying to make sure that things go on time and we all get coffee and cakes. Cakes and coffee, my responsibility, work will be Alex. I used to be the research partner for Turkey, and maybe I will continue, depends on Wednesday, if my colleague has a good leverage against me. But I am a political scientist teaching in university, but I am one of those people who's a youth worker with a PhD.
Thank you, Özge. Okay, then we are ready to really open the conference, and for that I would like to welcome our first welcome speaker, Andreas Schneider. He's coming from the from the Austrian Ministry, obviously, of Families and Youth. He is the head of the unit for international families and youth. Andreas, please.
Thank you, Alexandra, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants. It's my pleasure to welcome you in Vienna, in Austria, to this conference, and on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Families and Youth, where I'm the head of unit of. We all know what policy is, and we all know what research is. Policy aims at shaping society within its fields of action according to certain values and principles, and research, you might know it very well, relies on empirical evidence to show whether certain goals are effectively pursued by certain measures. Bringing these two together now seems quite obvious, but nevertheless, this was not always done, and unfortunately, it's still not always done or not done quite enough. The Council of Europe has focused on empirical evidence for quite some time now in most of its fields of activity. In the framework of the Committee of Experts on Social Policy for Families and Children, basic information about the family policy of the Council of Europe member states was collected. The outcome of the report was a report that complemented quantitative information with in-depth qualitative analysis. Using a concrete approach, a limited number of states were selected in order to analyze the impact of context, major structural changes, relevant stakeholders and actors on the developments and dynamics of family policies. Based on several considerations, some member states were chosen to reflect different types of family policy regimes as defined by existing typologies. This all sounded very basic at the time, but for the first time, a comprehensive database of family policies and aspects of these policies was mapped and has served as a useful tool for actions in this field, providing a diversity of perspectives for international comparison and policy. Turning now to your conference, to the RAY network. Quality assurance and quality development of the implementation of the Erasmus+ Youth in Action programs is essential to ultimately develop and implement effective youth policies. Understanding processes and outcomes of non-formal education activities in the field of youth establishes a foundation that is objective. As effects and impacts of short-term and long-term of the study is not only highly interesting, but also useful for policy development, both at the national and as well as the European level. The analysis of project methodologies and project management is more than just a description of a process. It seeks to explore the special qualities of Erasmus+ Youth in Action program. Research-based analysis and monitoring of Erasmus+ Youth in Action program is ultimately aiming at producing reliable and valid documentation and understanding of processes and outcomes of the program and of the activities supported through the program. We want to make Erasmus+ Youth in Action a success, and we expect that the research delivered by RAY will help us to achieve these goals. So please be ambitious. We expect a lot of you. I wish you a very fruitful conference, both on the content level, but also, equally important, a good exchange between your different fields of experience and expertise. Reliable evidence to better understand processes and outcomes in youth work and non-formal education is what has made this network so important for the program. Thank you very much and a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this warm welcome from the ministry. I'm now asking Gerhard Mooshammer, he's the director of DNA Erasmus+ Youth in Action in Austria, to also say some welcome words on behalf of DNA.
Hello, I'm also very happy and glad to welcome you in Vienna to the RAY Triangle Summit. It is actually the second summit here in Vienna of the RAY network, but it's the first one within the Erasmus+ program. Now we started like in a good tradition in Vienna, we started with a meal, and when I saw you all coming in, there were many familiar faces, but there were also many new faces in the RAY network. And this has a good reason that there are new faces. RAY started quite at the beginning of the previous program period of the Youth in Action program. In 2008, we had the first RAY network meeting with 5 pioneer NAs we kidnapped to Innsbruck to talk about the idea about making this effort to do a common research on the Youth in Action program. In the meanwhile, the RAY network has 30 members, which means almost all agencies of the Erasmus+ Youth in Action have joined the network. In previous meetings like this, I would say, and there are members Estonia, Finland, Slovakia. Now I actually should name those who are not members, but I won't, because it's much shorter. So it became quite a big network. It is actually one of the networks which almost includes the whole network of agencies of the Youth in Action. We have to say, among the youth sector, there were quite some discussions about how this new program Erasmus+ will look like and how the youth sector will be embedded in the youth sector. The RAY research also played a bit of a role in the comments about how to create a new program, and we also managed through the results of the RAY network in the Youth in Action period, to give some advice to policymakers and to show which outcomes Youth in Action has. And I think there was some influence, I would say, also on the creation of the new program through the research outcomes we produced within the RAY network. Then Erasmus Plus started. It was an integrated program. It is an integrated program with a youth sector, and for RAY it was actually quite a good moment, because a boost of RAY members, so many new, many agencies joined the network. And one reason also might be because research-based analysis became a part of the Erasmus Plus program. So it is now written in the as in the program guides, and also so that every agency should do research-based analysis. And I also would say, I think RAY played a role in that too. Now it is like a must for agencies to apply research in their daily work to make our program better. We are meeting here today and the coming days to discuss a bit, to show a bit what has happened in the last times, but also to give an outlook of the studies we have planned for the coming period of time. Also from the workload, I would say, the RAY network has grown. So we, next to the quantitative studies, the big questionnaire we also already introduced in the old program, in the Youth in Action program, and which we continue, of course, in a little bit new shape also in this program. The network also plans to conduct 3 qualitative studies, long-term studies, together. I know some of your agencies did this also before without the RAY network, but this is now a committed 3 qualitative studies where the network members are working together over quite a long period of time. I'm also very happy that there was a decision that the Austrian NA can host sort of a secretariat for the network. I think this is also an achievement of the network. I mean, we started, as I said, like 6, 7 NAs who cooperated together, but there was this time of, I would say, pioneer work has really ended with the last program. So now it's a network. It has a secretariat that takes care of the members. It's a growing number of members. We have a website, we have a mission statement, we have research to do, we have researchers, we have NAs committed. There is no coming and going of NAs, I hope, because we also had these times where members joined and members left and had no financing. Also something changed in the new program, that the financing of research is partly possible through the TCA, the Training and Cooperation Plan, which is probably also an achievement of a little bit an achievement of the work of the RAY network. So a success story, I guess, to be continued in the coming days. I all wish you to have a really good time in Vienna, to enjoy the meeting. For those who are new in the group, to really quickly fit into the group and start working with us on I think, quite interesting topics for research we have chosen within the RAY Erasmus Plus Youth in Action. Have a good day.
Thank you, Gerhard. Now, before we proceed to the keynote speakers, let me remind you that we have a hashtag, which is RAY Summit 2015. So this is one of the nice ways of evaluation as well. And our reporter will also follow your comments while you are listening and watching these next 2 days, and will include it in our report. And yes, we have a rapporteur. She's not an antisocial participant. Facebooking and chatting, Milena is our reporter, so don't think that she's playing games or tweeting and Facebooking in the back. She's writing, and please, she will find you and ask questions from time to time. So our keynote speaker is Maurice, and I feel privileged to be able to address him as Maurice because you have his CV. He's one of the very few Jean Monnet professors in the field of youth for his contribution in the field of youth. He's a director of the Center for Youth Research, and the sociologists among us might know him as well because he's the European vice president for Europe for RC34, which is the research group for youth of the International Sociological Association. But this all sounds like, yes, a very great academic, but I feel privileged to know him and to have worked with him in the pool of European youth researchers of the Council of Europe, because Maurice is one of those people who was a youth worker, a youth activist, and became a famous professor afterwards. So he was a kind of role model for many of us who was going to exchanges, and in the night when people are partying, we were trying to write our next paper and email it. So thank you for all the inspiration. And he was kind enough to accept our invitation and join us for the summit. And he will be talking about youth research, youth policy linkage from a comparative perspective as well. Well, without further ado, Maurice.
Thank you, Özge. I'm apprehensive now about disappointing you after all that, but I'll do my best. It's a pleasure to be here. I have two functions at this event. I was going to be here anyway because I'm joining the RAY network, and I'm delighted to say my colleague Ivana Darcy from the National Agency in Ireland is here also. So we'll be getting to know much more about RAY, and I'm really looking forward to that. But I was invited also to say some words at the outset about the relationship between youth research and youth work, primarily because, as Özgen has said, I'm both a youth worker, former youth work practitioner, a current educator of youth workers, as well as a youth research academic, and also with an involvement in policy at European level. So since we're talking about triangulation here, I feel I have something to say about the different corners of the triangle and the relationship between them. In fact, sometimes I wonder where exactly in the triangle I am on any one day. But I know there are others here who feel the same sometimes. Firstly, a few words about the very idea of youth research. And one thing we can say about it is that as a field or fields of study, youth research itself is quite young. Young people have been studied for as long as people have studied anyone or anything. And writers have made comments about young people with more or less authority for as long as writers have written about anyone or anything. But youth research in its modern form really only dates from after the Second World War. There was a lot of research on young people and children in the late 19th and early 20th century, but the focus tended to be on a particular aspect of their lives: urban poverty, deprivation, so-called delinquency, deviance, and so on. The notion that youth in itself was a topic worthy of study really came somewhat later, primarily, as I say, after the Second World War. So it is relatively recent as a scholarly and intellectual area of endeavor. As the term suggests, it's multidisciplinary. The term youth research says that it's research about an undefined or unspecified age group, but of course it can come from a whole range of disciplinary perspectives, and that is a very distinctive feature about it. It's cross-sectoral, it's thematically transversal, so youth researchers have things to say about family, education, training, employment, crime, health, justice, all the rest of it. Working in the field of youth research calls upon us to be rather versatile and flexible and open to engaging with all kinds of topics and themes. What that also means, however, is that some of the most interesting research on young people is carried out by academics and researchers who do not define themselves as youth researchers at all. And those who do define themselves as youth researchers are sometimes not sufficiently aware of research that's going on in some of these more mainstream, established fields of scholarly activity, like family health and so on. And youth research has struggled to establish itself on the same footing as some of those other more mainstream fields. And a final point by way of preamble is that from the outset, youth research has had a strong applied focus. We have come to talk about the triangle of youth research and policy and practice. It's mentioned in the very title of this event. The notion of the triangle of youth research, policy and practice has become well established throughout Europe. But in fact, going way back to the 1940s, after the Second World War, when youth research began to be institutionalized, it had an eye on policy and on practice. And many of those who began, who were pioneers in the field, were themselves also interested in policy and practice. And that's reflected, if we look at some of the key dates in the emergence of youth research, that's reflected in what happened and who took the initiative. So in 1948, the International Sociological Association's Research Committee on Youth had its origins in partnership with UNESCO. That in itself tells you something about the application involved, the interest in policy and in practice rather than research for its own sake. The first national youth research institute is generally said to be the German one, 1963, and a whole plethora of other ones followed. The Council of Europe, shortly after the UN, which was involved at the outset, as you can see, shortly after the UN first International Year of Youth in 1985, a range of knock-on or follow-on developments took place. The Council of Europe established an expert group on youth research and documentation. The first major regional youth research network within Europe emerged in the Nordic countries. And shortly afterwards, again, the European Sociological Association established its its network, research network, RN30, on youth and generation. And you can see there that despite the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary nature of youth research, it's fair, I think anyway, but then I would say it because I'm a sociologist, it's fair to credit sociology with having taken the lead. While others are involved, and while the Research Committee on Youth of the ISA includes educational scientists, political scientists, geographers, youth workers, and so on and so forth, sociology has been the discipline within which the most focused attention to youth research per se has been devoted. And you could say that youth in itself, at least in academic terms, is primarily a sociological concept, certainly much more so than it is a psychological concept. Within psychology, the dominant discourse that applies to young people is that of adolescence. In 1998, when the European Commission was in the preparatory stages of working towards the white paper on youth that was eventually published in 2001, it convened an expert group of youth researchers, of which I was glad to be one. That in itself reflected the fact that the very impetus that led to the publication of a document called A New Impetus came not least from the research community. So this was one very important example of researchers themselves being among those who were proactive in shaping policy initiatives at European level. And then the EU, the European Commission and the Council of Europe in 2005 launched a partnership which is going strong to this day and which has had, among other things, a strong research focus. The European Knowledge Centre on Youth Policy, the Pool of European Youth Researchers, there are people here from both of those, the emphasis on youth knowledge and a youth knowledge series with many volumes, and then two other specific series that many of you will know about. The History of Youth Work in Europe, that has had 4 volumes published to date, the 5th in preparation, and the Perspectives on Youth series, of which I'm on the editorial board, just about to have its 3rd volume published. So the partnership has had a very important role to play in the field of promoting youth research. And it was the white paper and the work that followed from that that helped to ensure that during the first decade of the new century, youth research featured quite prominently in the framework programs. And there are a number of publications that have summarized that research, ones like this on social inclusion of youth on the margins of society, published by the European Commission, or this one, which I picked up at the European Youth Work Convention in Brussels 2 weeks ago, and which I don't even think is online yet. I certainly couldn't find it there myself. Their Future is Our Future, Youth as Actors of Change, and summaries of a whole range of research projects, major multinational research projects, either ongoing FP7, completed FP7, or newly commencing Horizon 2020 ones. It's unlikely that this level of activity would be happening had it not been for the white paper and all the work that went into that, because one of the objectives of the white paper was a better understanding of youth. And then the lifelong learning program itself similarly had a focus on youth related research, and my own Jean Monnet chair is a reflection of that. And we also have in Maynooth University a centre of excellence on youth work, education and training at European level, which I think is the only one of its kind. So it's very important, while we're here for the purpose we're here and in the context of a Ray event, that we acknowledge the influence of the late Lynn Chisholm. In relation to all of what I've said, most of what I've said up until now, and particularly those developments that took place over the last 15 years or so, to 20 years in fact, Lynn Chisholm was absolutely pivotal. And in summarizing the major trends in youth research in the early 21st century, a volume that she co-edited a few years ago that was prepared for the European Youth Studies master's degree suggested that there were 3 major trends that had helped to ensure the integration and the higher profile of European level youth research: the strengthening of the networks of researchers themselves, the new EU youth strategy, or EU strategy, I beg your pardon, to promote transnational research, such as the ones I've mentioned. I would add to that the fact that in many cases national research budgets were becoming constricted, and so many researchers looked to European level funding to fill the gap or to compensate for the deficit. And that was greatly to the advantage of international, transnational and comparative research. And then, in particular, the development of European youth policy as a meaningful concept through the actions of the Council of Europe and the European Commission, and the two acting in concert. There are a number of specifically European Union developments that I've listed here. I'm not going to go through them, and we have someone from the Commission who may mention some of these shortly. The main point is that since the White Paper explicitly indicated that it was important to gain a better understanding of youth, youth-related research has featured prominently in all subsequent developments, including the youth strategy, the Council resolution on youth work, the most high-profile statement to date specifically about youth work in the European Union, and one that explicitly addresses the issue of research. And then, just last year, prompted by those developments, among others, the publication of the report, Working with Young People, the Value of Youth Work in the European Union. This is just the summary. The actual report is a much, much larger document, and there are national country reports for all members of the EU as well. So this is a sign, I think it's fair to say, of healthy growth and development in the field of youth research, so at European level. So why does that matter? Why is it important for youth work? And youth work, the concept of youth work, of course, includes youth mobility programs, youth exchange programs, using non-formal education. The first point I'd make is that youth work is itself, good youth work anyway, is inherently inquisitive. It's inherently inquiring, and it's inherently critical. So there's a very strong complementarity between good youth work practice and a research focus. This is why it's important that we don't see youth research as something that is parachuted into youth work, but that we find ways of developing organic links between the research agenda and the practice agenda. There's a particular potential for further development in relation to action research and participatory research, given the methods and the processes that lie at the heart of youth work itself. There is some very worthwhile work to date using these approaches, but surprisingly little. There are intrinsic benefits in making use of youth research for youth work. Intrinsic benefits in terms of enhancing processes, enhancing outcomes. There are also extrinsic benefits. In a climate, as we've already heard, where there's an increasing emphasis on evidence-based approaches to policy and to practice, there are extrinsic benefits in being better able to demonstrate the quality of the work that is being carried out with public funds. But then, I think, most importantly probably, there are intrinsic and extrinsic benefits in terms of developing youth work as a profession. No profession, certainly no profession that has achieved official recognition, statutory recognition, significant public funding and so on, has managed to reach that point without a very significant research dimension. And we can't expect that anything different would apply in the case of youth work. But transnational and comparative research approaches are particularly important when we talk about international youth work and European youth work. And that is because, at least substantially because, of the diversity of youth work within Europe in terms of language and culture, in terms of history and policy, in terms of administration and principles and practice. And this, just to illustrate that in a very straightforward way, some of you will have witnessed me making use of this slide before. This is a composite presentation of all the terms that we find if we go to a document like the European Youth Strategy, published in 2009 by the Commission, and then move from the English version, where it refers to youth work throughout, or many places throughout, and then you go to the other languages of the EU, and you see, well, what's in there where it says youth work? And this is what you'll find. There may be a mistake here, which I haven't yet corrected, but I think I've been alerted to in, I think it's the Greek version. And I'll be very happy if someone will help me to get that right. But you can see that in some cases, the English language concept of youth work translates pretty directly into another language and all that goes with that. In some cases, it's a bit labored because the term that the English can be translated into isn't always one that that necessarily trips off the tongue in other European languages. It can be somewhat contrived for the purposes of these kinds of documents, rather than being a concept that is in everyday use in the relevant country or culture. And then in some places, the term youth work itself isn't the one that is used at all, or a translation of it. In some places, the fact that it's work with young people doesn't even get mentioned in the name of the practice or the profession. It's socio-cultural animation or social pedagogy or some variant of that. So it's really important that good, systematic, transnational, comparative research takes place so as to help us to explore both the differences and the similarities in youth work principles, in youth work theories, and in youth work practices, and of course policies throughout the broader Europe. And that is beginning to happen. The study that I mentioned, published in 2014, is one such effort. People have criticized aspects of it, but it's a starting point that is most welcome, I think. Ray itself is another instance of attempting to do this. And this is just one snapshot from the study of the value of youth work in the European Union, which is an example. I'm sorry for the poor quality of the slide, but it's an example of the kind of synthetic analysis that is possible when we take a broad view of what's going on in Europe. This is one of the typologies presented in that report, suggesting that there are two axes along which youth work throughout Europe is conceived and practiced, between issue-based work with particular groups of young people and personal development work with young people in general, and then on the other hand, between targeted youth work and universal youth work, or what's sometimes called open youth work. To begin to conclude, I just want to inform some of you, but no doubt simply remind the vast majority of you, that the place of youth research within the youth work sector, among all of us involved in youth work and trying to promote it nationally and at European level, the place of youth research is now pretty well established. And just to illustrate that, the second European Youth Work Convention that took place in Brussels 2 weeks ago, and at which quite a few of us were present, one of the sections of the declaration emerging from the convention was titled "Towards a Knowledge-Based Approach," and it's acknowledged that some progress has been made, but that quite a lot remains to be done. So I'm not going to read these out. It's just to inform you, and I think Alexandra may say a little bit about this later too. So some measures have taken place, but youth work needs more, not just more in terms of quantity, but more in terms of quality, and particularly quality of certain types of research. The focus on reflective practice, for example, which is a key part of a professional approach to the vocation of youth work. And the theme of the convention was towards a common ground. And the declaration acknowledges again that there has been progress in that regard, and that further steps are still needed to finding common ground. I think one of the things that is most valuable in developments in youth work at European level over the last few years, prompted to a significant extent by research, is the emergence of a shared vocabulary for talking about youth work, for making policy for youth work, and for practicing youth work, and then reflecting on it. But there's further work to be done, as the declaration says. And it emphasizes the contribution of peer learning and peer review, as well as cooperation and exchange in doing so. And so it's only appropriate to conclude by acknowledging the work of Ray, which was quite pioneering in attempting to move in the direction that is being urged by the recent convention declaration and others. I just took this from this statement of intent or objective from one of the Ray publications summarizing the findings of the one of the annual studies. To contribute to the generation of new knowledge about the processes and outcomes of non-formal education activities, in particular in the youth field, but at the same time aiming to contribute to quality assurance and the development in the implementation of the Youth in Action programme, and to evidence-based and research-informed youth policy development. So Ray has been trying to do for quite a long time what many people are now acknowledging needs to be done. And I'm personally delighted that I'll be, from here on in, involved in working with many of you in trying to do that together. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Maurice. There has been a lot of mentions of the European level and the Commission and the Council of Europe. And we are, the next speaker is actually the advisor to the DG EAC, Bernard Noth, who's going to speak about the youth work, research, policy, and evidence-based decision-making. Well, you know what I'm talking about. Please.
Thanks for having me here. I mean, it's a pleasure to be in this youth environment for once, because as you know, I come from a bit wider environment. I come from the Erasmus Plus background, so which is, as you all know, the wider program. They're not only looking at youth, but youth is one of the particular aspects of it, and for that I think it's useful that to be here, and for other reasons which I will talk to you about later. My perspective is very different from the one that Maurice just pictured, which is I mean, as he said, he's coming from youth work, has been doing a lot of research, and so from the practice has been involved in policy development. So my perspective really comes from the program, and which touches up on various elements of the triangle. I mean, there's clearly the program is very much linked to the practice. I mean, we try to put practice in place, but also to the policy side, the link between the two, and using research, supporting research to some extent in this framework. As has been mentioned earlier already by Gerhard also, is that the attention under Erasmus Plus to research has been increasing, and that has a very simple reason, I would say. As you know, we managed to get more money for this program, and a sizable increase. I mean, one of the biggest increase of all programs, to be clear. But that basically has an immediate question coming with it. You get more money, but what are you doing with that money? What is the purpose of that money? Is it useful? Does it serve a purpose, and will it change something? So that immediately draws the question to having research on the results of the program, on the impact of the program. And you see that in the definition of the program, there's a much bigger focus on results. So what do we achieve with beneficiaries of the program, with participants of the program, organizations, etc. And what impacts do we have? And impacts, when we talk about that, we usually think about how can we change systems, how can we change policies. So that is true both for education as for youth within the program. And if you then look at the objectives of the program in the youth field, because you know there's a big parallelism between the two main domains, education and youth, but there's some specificities. So if I look at the youth field, the general objective, the main purpose is the alignment with the policy objective. So what has been put forward in the framework for European cooperation, the strategy, the 2010-2018 strategy was mentioned on one of the slides. So the program is clearly put in that framework to contribute. How can we contribute to the policy? And then we get to the more specific objectives, where we have three sets of three objectives, which are mainly linked with three types of actions that we have in the program. So you know the program has three key actions, as we call them in our lingo. First key action is the one linked to mobility, to youth work, I mean the real actions on the field. The second one is more reflective, I would say. I mean it's projects. I mean how can we, through cooperation, improve things and etc. And the third one is really on policy cooperation. So that's really supporting the policy development, etc. So we have objectives that link to each of these. I mean, for the one linked to the mobility, we have improved the level of key competences and skills of young people, including those with fewer opportunities, as well as to promote the participation in democratic life and a number of other words that all link to the citizenship concept. So we have the two aspects: develop the skills, the competences on a personal level. You could also extend that to the organizations and improve the organizations that are working with youth, and the citizenship aspect. So both of these aspects are present in as a justification or an objective for mobility and for moving people around Europe and working together. On the cooperation projects part, or the second key action, there it's really about improving the quality of youth work. So that's really about more centered along the organizations, the youth work organizations. And the third one, as I said, is the policy cooperation, and there it is to complement policy reforms that are happening. As you know, I mean, youth is at European level is complementary to what's happening at national level, because subsidiarity and other of these difficult words that we use is clearly putting the responsibility for youth policy at a national or even lower level, local, regional levels. But there in the objective, there is the explicit reference to evidence-based youth policy and the development of knowledge. So that is clearly there in the objectives of the program. And then there's a fourth specific objective, which is the international dimension. When we talk about international, that means outside of the EU, so working with third countries. As Gerhard also mentioned, we have also put, to some extent, the money where our mouth is, and we have now, under TCA, created some possibilities to support transnational research in the youth area. Another reason why I'm glad that I'm here today is that the timing is right. I mean, we all struggled, the ones that are working on the program on last year, on trying to get the details right, trying to get the implementation right, getting over all the difficulties and problems of launching a new program. Especially in the youth area, I think we should start getting beyond that, because you have these 3 calls per year, so you're now already on your 5th call, so that's some routine is returning, I hope, so that we can put that behind us and now switch basically to the first place, monitoring what do we do, measuring what we do, and evaluating. So seeing what are the results and the impacts. And as you know, that is something that is foreseen clearly in the legal ways, also in the program. So there is this monitoring obligation. There is the obligation to evaluate the program. For those who are not familiar with it, I mean, we have an obligation to do a midterm evaluation of the new program, so of all the aspects, including youth, and that we need to finish by the end of 2017 in order to be ready to feed into the discussions for the next program. I don't know what that one will be called, Erasmus Plus Plus or Erasmus Multiplied or whatever. We'll see. So that we're doing in preparation of the next generation of programs already. But we also still need to look back at the previous generation of programs, some of the Youth in Action in your case, where there was a midterm evaluation done in 2010. And now we need to complement that with a final evaluation where we will be much more, we should be more able to look at impact, because the midterm evaluation was too early to look at that. So we was mainly looking at the results, how can we, what kind of changes were we able to put in place for beneficiaries, for organizations, etc., but less what kind of influence is there on policies, what kind of influence is there on structures. So that we should hopefully be more able to do in this ex-post evaluation of the previous Youth in Action program. It will happen at the same time, so it will be one bigger exercise looking back at Youth in Action and looking at the interim evaluation of the of Erasmus Plus Youth in Action in your case. It has already been mentioned that RAI is an essential and I would say a very welcome network to do all that, because it can help to do several things. Together with the national agencies, which constitute, together with the research institutions, the network, of course. Because one very immediate element of trying to draw conclusions from what we do in a program is what we call dissemination of the program results, which is simply looking at what we've done, what has worked well, what doesn't work well, what are good projects, which projects could be useful for others that want to launch projects, that want to do some youth work. So this relatively quick selection of good practices, of good projects, that is something that will function in a bottom-up way. So all agencies will be asked to look at the best examples that they have, and then we will bring that together at European level to try to exchange and try to use them. So that's a very something that should work relatively quickly. Your research that you're doing, looking at the results of the program, will obviously feed into what I just described, the evaluation, so the implementation and the impact of the program. There is a national contribution to that evaluation also expected, so that is expected in 2017 also. So each member state will, not each agency, but each member state will have to contribute with a report, a sort of own evaluation on how the program functions in each country. So in most cases, it's quite obvious that the NAs will play a contributing role in that, and the RAI network through the youth NAs would be quite natural, naturally feeding into that. I mean, in the discussion so far, we have looked a lot at how does this feed into European policy, how does what developments do we have at EU level on youth policy, etc. But as I said earlier, we should not forget that youth policy is largely a national responsibility, and that also means that we should establish good transmission mechanisms, I would say transmission channels, between the practice of the program and national policy making in the youth area. So, and that's each NA has an important role there, I would say, not only in the youth field, but in the youth field again, that can be supported by evidence that comes from the work that RAI is doing, because you need knowledge and support to feed into the national policies, that's clearly. I was saying earlier the time is right and 2017, I talked a lot about 2017, might seem far away. But in Europe also, I mean, in one of the next weeks, the Commission will come out with a new package on better regulation. So how do we make sure that our regulation, when we make it, also on our side, is based on evidence, is based on consultation, on what people have to say, experts in the field have to say about it. So and part of this new better regulation package will also be a better consultation, better picking up elements from the broad public. The downside of that is that it will take even a bit more time than it already does to prepare new proposals, etc., and to negotiate new proposals, because there will be consultation elements, consultations times all through the process of making the evaluation, making the impact assessment on the proposal, and then etc. So that will take a bit more time to do it better, I think. I mean, and then but that means also that you need to start well ahead of time to prepare this. And in a particular domain of Erasmus+, as I already said, there is this reporting that will be expected from the member states. So we want to make sure that this reporting will be useful for the development of the new program, the future program. And for that reason, we will have to be discussing with the member states quite early what kind of contributions would be useful, what do we expect, what can be done. So we should not wait too long, because the 2017, in those, if you then need to start preparing, collecting data, analyzing data, then we don't have too much time. As I said, RAY is a very useful platform or network, and you have been doing some of the things for a while on the quantitative analysis, and we need to reflect a bit, I think, to make sure that we don't get to an over demanding feedback on our youth workers, not only in the youth area but in other areas. So we need to, I think, reflect on, because in Erasmus+ we also have now a more systematic collection of feedback of the participants of the program. So we need, I think, to reflect carefully how what you do can be complementary to what we do, and this can be complementary either in timing or in coverage or kind of questions. But I think we need to think a bit about that, because ours really comes at the end of the action immediately. So yours could maybe be coming a bit later, or looking at wider aspects or things like that. So that's something to take into account. Another change with the new program is that it has become a bit easier to do these kind of things, because now we have databases with all the participants of the program, which we didn't have in the past. We only had the beneficiaries and had to ask through the beneficiaries questions to the participants. So it was a bit more complicated. So that should make it easier now to do these kind of things. As I said, we will also be doing work on the evaluation. We will outsource, as usually, to an external consultant the main work of the evaluation. So there will also be doing consultations and interviews and surveys and stuff like that. So we really need to, as I said, as important as collecting information and evidence-based policy making is, we also need to make sure that we don't over-demand the participants. But I think, as I said several times, I think RAY is an important platform in this, and it has qualities that we, in the daily work of the Commission, do not have in this. So I think RAY is more continuous, more. It's more based in the practice than we will be, because even, as I said, even if we outsource part of an evaluation to a consultant that is not necessarily a consultant that has a lot of experience in all of the domains that it will have to look at, including the youth domain. So I think your strength in the RAIN network is this, the intimate knowledge of the sector, the intimate knowledge of youth work, that you can bring in the specific aspects of this network and of this sector. So that's why I welcome shortly a summary of why I welcome your work and being here today to listen to you also, because as I said, I'm not an expert in youth research, but I think it's important to hear the specificities of this sector compared to the other parts of the Erasmus Plus program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Please just stay with us for the panel right away. I also invite Maurice back on the stage for our discussion. And yeah, anywhere where you feel comfortable. And I would like to also introduce a third speaker for our TV show, Birgit Klauser. She's coming from the Austrian Ministry of Families and Youth, and she's the deputy head of the International Families and Youth Unit. She's going to join the discussion here. Welcome. Thank you. Before we settle in, Özge, are you going to join us as well, or? Özge is also joining us. We would like to know a bit, and also to have for our speakers the opportunity to know a bit who is here. So we would like to see those of you who are coming from NAs. Raise your hands. That's many, yeah. National agencies, yeah. So then the next question is, of course, who would be a youth researcher? A bit less. Do we have youth workers? Okay. And somebody who would say, I am representing an institution. I'm coming from administration, authorities, ministries, departments. Oh! Welcome. Okay. So we know a bit who is here. Thank you. I would like to raise the first question for Birgit, of course. Now you were here the whole opening, you were listening to the speeches, so the question is, what do you take from that, or can you add something from a national perspective, a national authority?
Thank you. Well, add something. You heard the professor speaking for his 20 minutes, you heard European Commission talking quite a lot about perspectives and upcoming useful parts of combining research, the program. And now I have to tell you what was missing. Well, so what I will focus on is the core elements that were not mentioned because everyone expects them to be there naturally. Why are we doing this program, basically? Basically because it should be fun. We forget this a bit, having deadlines, having technical details, worrying about funding, worrying about what the auditor is going to say. But basically, we are all here because we want to enable something that should be fun for young people, and we should deliver what we are contributing to this fun in good style. Not in the stressed behavior of someone who is rushing from one deadline to the next, trying to find out how to fill in another weird form, and being afraid of making a mistake while we are doing this. So what I liked about the presentation was something I would not have dared to do, but for these professors are always good on the podium. He started with World War II. Did you hear this? He opens a youth conference and dares to start with World War II. And by chance, it was quite a topic during the last days or weeks in Austrian media, because up to just a few years ago, we were not so sure what had happened in 1945. Did Austria lose the war, or were we liberated? Probably this was not such an issue in your countries, but it's a very specific thing that now, 70 years after, a majority of Austrians might be of the opinion we were liberated. And there were lots of documentaries and lots of portraits of people who were young at these times. And what they all said is, it was such a lovely spring. It was such a feeling of a dark shadow that was gone and everything was open. The world looked to be new. And everyone had the feeling, now there is time and space for my new idea. Now we could set up something new. We can create something. Our children will live a better life. All those things you might remember, whoever of you ever talked to his, her grandparents. You'll know how those phrases sounded. And now, at this time, we have another lovely spring. We live quite in freedom and security. There's no reason, no real reason to be afraid of anything specific. And how do we feel? Do we feel like we can create something? Do we feel like we can manage the challenges we face in migration, in education? Or do we often, whenever we start thinking about such big issues, we think, well, stop it. It's not worth the energy. Let's rather focus on the next deadline. I know I have a form to fill, so why spending fruitless hours of discussion on something where I cannot contribute? And what I want to remind you of is, obviously, that's the policy triangle. If we don't contribute to it, who should? So I would like you to take one step back, look at the large frame again, at the bigger picture, and think about, why are we doing it? We are doing it because of fun, and not because we want to learn more about time management or forms. It's necessary sometimes, but it's not the aim. Yeah, probably I should stop here. It can't get better, right?
Thank you, Birgit.
As you have realized, this TV show, we had a lot of fun designing it, because in such events, when you have keynote speakers, they are up there. They are the cool people. They speak, we clap, and then they go. No, not this time, we said. We'll ask them to crossfire each other. So, Bernard, what did you make of Maurice's speech? Are there points of agreements or disagreements of the topics he raised?
I don't see any disagreement. sorry to disappoint you. It's a bad show we're putting here together, but again, the ratings are going down. Yes, but as I said when I started speaking, the perspective is very different. I mean, you come from as you explained, through the youth work, but mainly from the research area. You look at all these interactions at European level, where you get more agreement and more analysis on what's going on. But maybe as one element and maybe one aspect where I could ask you to reflect. I mean, and I work at the European level myself, but as I said several times, youth policy is mainly something that happens at national level. We try to put a layer above that in Europe, where we try to exchange best practices and learn from each other, and especially in the youth area also transpose good examples, to try to transpose good examples to other countries, because, for instance, in the area of voluntary work, and not all countries have similar developments, etc. So, but still, I think a lot is country specific and happens at the country level. And one feeling I had, I mean, when you were talking about all these European cooperation and at the Council of Europe, etc., what is the effect on the ground of all these things? I mean, that was a bit what I was wondering, and I shouldn't say that as I said, as I work at the European level myself, but that was a bit, if I have to find a small point, that was the one, I think.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. And Maurice, then, what did you make of Bernard's speech? Anything you would take with you? Any shaking heads? And what do you have to say about his question? This national level, European level, in your speech as well, you made a lot of references that at European level there are many initiatives, there are many supports, comparative, international, transnational data collection exercises, but you are also familiar with different national levels as well. Do you think Europe is hearing researchers more than some national levels?
Undoubtedly, much more than some national levels. And that partly relates, I think, to Bernard's comment. And one of the points I was going to pick up on his presentation was the principle of subsidiarity. And he's absolutely right that it is the competence, primary competence rests with the member states of the EU when it comes to social policy initiatives, including youth policy. And ultimately, youth policy is a branch of social policy, broadly defined. And that is unquestionable, and it's formally in the treaties since, I think it was Maastricht. But nonetheless, there has been a very gradual, but no less real process of certainly of sharing and possibly of harmonizing approaches to a whole range of social services and social policies, including youth work and youth policy. And the European Commission has quite deliberately attempted to foster that process. Through the open method of coordination, which was introduced to the youth field in the white paper in 2001, it was already in other fields before that, and which has continued through the cooperation, the new framework for cooperation, generally referred to as the strategy. That is replicating in the youth field a process that has been underway in a range of other fields for some years, whereby despite recognizing the principle of subsidiarity, member states are being invited to develop common objectives, share their learning about what's happening in relation to meeting those common objectives, and reflect on that on an ongoing iterative and then reiterative and incremental way. And so that it's a very, very gradual process, but it is leading to very effective shared learning and possibly to things happening more similarly throughout the continent and certainly throughout the EU. And so on the ground, things are changing gradually, because in some places where there was limited, if any, tradition of youth work, for example, there are incipient youth work movements and organizations and forms of practice and forms of training. And this is all, it's not accidental, it's happening because of a policy. So the principle of subsidiarity isn't incompatible with things happening at European level. And I think, in fact, that the Commission has been highly sophisticated in how it's gone about that. Some people who might be more Eurosceptic than I am, or even antipathetic to the EU, might regard it as a very sinister, underhand process, but I actually think it has been a very positive process. And research has contributed to it, and research, as I said already, has been given a lot of recognition in the youth policy and youth work field. In relation to other comments Bernard made, I similarly wouldn't take a strong issue with anything he said. And I fully agree that, and I think I mentioned it, that when increased public funding is being devoted to any sphere of activity, those engaged in the activity have to be ready to justify the expenditure of such funds. They have to be able to demonstrate that it's good use of public funds. So I don't argue at all with the evidence-based policy making or with the focus on outcomes and impact in the youth work field. But I do think it's very important that the tools and the instruments that are used are appropriate to the youth work context. And sometimes they're not. And there's an undue emphasis on quantification, in particular being applied to things that cannot be counted, and that cannot be counted sometimes within a very short time frame in particular. Now, I do think that youth workers should be better at counting the things that can be counted and at communicating that to other people. And sometimes they don't try hard enough, and I didn't try hard enough when I was more directly involved in practice to quantify the things that could be quantified. So that should be improved. But there are some things that cannot be quantified that young people gain from youth work that have to do with its most valuable features, in fact. Relationships, self-esteem, tolerance, and so on and so forth. You can design instruments to measure some of these things, but some of them, it's extremely difficult, and I would say actually impossible to quantify in a meaningful way. But more importantly, it's certainly impossible to do it within a short time frame. I did a national study of the purpose and outcomes of youth work in Ireland with a colleague some years ago, based on detailed case studies of sites that were selected on the basis that they had reputations for good practice. And we did in-depth interviews with youth workers and with young people, and then we administered a questionnaire instrument to them all. The numbers were small, a couple of hundred, but nonetheless, the findings were very interesting. Time and time again, we heard from the youth workers that time itself was a vital factor when it comes to learning through youth work practice. It takes time. And these sites that we selected had youth workers practicing in them who had been there for many years. And the projects had become embedded in their communities. And so this was something we heard time and time again. Workers would say, I didn't know until years afterwards that that young person had taken that learning from my engagement with them. It happened so often that we were very persuaded by it. And then when we looked at the findings from the young people, particularly the questionnaire quantitative findings, there was a clear pattern whereby the things that they said they were gaining after a relatively short period of time of engagement changed when we looked at what young people said who had been engaged for longer. So, I won't go into the detail of what the changes were, but I can if there's time. But so, time needs to be factored in, and it isn't in almost all, mainstream evidence-based evaluations. It's just not there. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say then that is missing is that I completely agree with Bernard's comment about the need not to be too demanding or imposing further burdens on practitioners on top of what's there already. So find complementary ways of doing so. But what I would add is that more effort should go into ensuring that the quality of the inputs is of the very best order. In other words, that the quality of the practice that youth workers are engaging in, whatever age they are, is as good as it can possibly be through adequate training and education of youth workers, whether paid or volunteer. I think nothing like enough effort has been, or money has been expended on that.
Thank you. I would like to open the floor at this point and also give you the chance to comment or ask questions if there is any. Is there anybody who would like to contribute or ask something at this point?
Helmut.
You have a session afterwards, you know that, right?
And time is an issue also here. That goes for all of you.
I was thinking about what you said, Birgit. And this is one side of it, because you said we live in peace, it's quiet, we are secure and we're safe and all that. Yes, this is true. If you look at the European Union, and even there, maybe it's not so true. We know that there is a discrepancy of distribution of resources also in Europe. Maybe not as existential as other places, but it is there. And it's one of the biggest crises we have actually in the European Union since its origin. It's the economic crisis, as it's called, but it is a crisis of distribution of resources that becomes very prominent at this point. But I think we can also go a step further, and this I think when I come back to Youth in Action is relevant, because we don't look in Youth in Action at the European Union. Yes, we do, but we look beyond it. And we have a civil war or something like it in Europe. And it is, let's say, not so sure how that develops and what kind of measures are necessary to prevent how do you call it, an explosion there in this region and beyond, because that would have a kind of a fire effect that wouldn't stop in the Ukraine. But what struck me is how quickly we come to this inclusive view of Europe or the European Union, where we know that outside these borders of the European Union, there's an even bigger injustice of distribution of resources, which makes people flee their countries in millions. And our problem is, so to say, what do we do with this at our borders? It's unresolved. It's kind of suppressed in our thinking. We haven't thought, we had it a week ago on the agenda, and it's already gone from the agenda again. And I think this is something where I come back to what you, Bernard, mentioned is very interesting. The term citizenship came up. This has to do with citizenship, but not with a purely European citizenship, but with democratic, active citizenship in a global sense. And I think this is where maybe there is this, it's not World War II where we are here, but we are at one of the bigger crises of how do we deal with a distribution of resources which is very unfair and which partly has been caused in some way or influenced or supported by us as industrialized countries of the north, of Europe, United States, you name it, with global climate change being one of the effects of the way we live and the way we produce. And the situation in the southern, so-called southern countries is partly the way it is because of the interaction between the North and the South. And I think this is one of the issues that I would say as a political dimension of what we are doing in youth work, in international youth work, in Youth in Action.
Thank you, Helmut, for this intervention. Is there, who would like to react to this? Or does anybody want to react to this? You start, Bernard.
As you said, I mentioned citizenship, and not by accident, indeed, especially in the youth area. Because when the program was developed a couple of years ago, the focus was fully on skills. And it's almost by accident that there was still citizenship mentioned, and I'm exaggerating now, but it's still there. And it's important now that it is still there, because I agree with you. It's gaining much more prominence than maybe a couple of years ago, when we were so much focused on the crisis, the economic crisis, etc. But now we have other aspects that are linked, as you say, to economics, but other aspects at our borders, but also in our countries. I mean, the couple of attacks that we have seen in Paris and in Denmark, etc., all have I mean, one thing we can try to do about that is to have a better integration and citizenship in the sense that you mentioned it. I mean, democratic participation in the daily life and in the political development of the country. So in that sense, I think especially not all parts of the program are equally equipped to do that, but youth certainly is the youth part. I mean, we have the schools part, of course, also can play a role there, but youth definitely can and does so by a lot of the actions and activities that we have now already. So yes, I agree.
Maurice also wishes to comment shortly, please, because
shortly.
time is an issue also here.
Okay.
We have to finish.
I didn't say it earlier, but I was very glad that Birgit introduced the visionary dimension, because when we talk about structures and policies and initiatives and so on, we forget about that. But the visionary and indeed the political dimension that Helmut picked up on, they are key elements of the history and the contemporary practice of youth work. And when I said that it was after World War II that youth researchers had an eye on policy and practice, it was with a view to building a world in which what had happened before could not happen again. So that challenge remains, and unfortunately we have appalling inequalities within Europe, as you say, Helmut. But I am very conscious of the fact that that is what youth work is about. Ultimately, I'm very conscious of the ongoing challenge where I'm from, which is the north of Ireland, for example, where there's a precarious peace and where youth work is playing an important role in helping to ensure that it lasts. So I couldn't agree with you more about that. But youth workers and youth researchers, I think, have helped to ensure that, at least on paper, the statements that have been made about youth work, including the Council resolution of 2010, that they do reflect the ethical and the value dimension of youth work. Unfortunately, there has been insufficient action as a result.
Thank you, Maurice. We're running out of time, but maybe, Birgit, you want to add one or two sentences to... No, actually, I have to round it up anyway. I'm sorry, but we do not have time to go into a deeper discussion yet, so this would be the ending words for this round, basically.
So if this is the time, I liked a few other things, or one other thing that Bernard mentioned was sort of when he tried to show us the way into the future of the network, of RAE, of research. He focused a bit on dissemination of program results and also of the contribution to the evaluation of the program. And of course, those are two important things to keep in mind when you are discussing the work program of the RAE network of the next few, years, decades. That somehow, of course, we all expect you to contribute to these two issues. But nevertheless, this World War II issue, this civil war, the distribution of wealth, the fun that young people should have in going out into the world, trying to trust other people, trying to collect Facebook friends and collect new language as well, trying to understand different concepts. This should always be the focus of why we try to monitor, why we try to evaluate, why we try to quantify the things that can be counted. And what I, from a policy perspective, would expect of good research in this sector that would help us is this trying to develop, to show us new ways of how we can define the value of an outcome. What is worth, it's more or less your decision as researchers to define what is worth being counted and for what do we need to find different methods of making it a bit more interesting for our participants in research to contribute. And how can we make those policymakers being interested in reading or listening to what we found. So if I wish for anything concrete. I would wish you to enjoy the spring and to be brave in your decisions and to sell it to us as something that is interesting, because it's based on curiosity and not on another need to monitor something because there's a deadline, right? Thank you.
Thank you. And
before we wrap up, you might have noticed that out of this triangle, 2 points were stressed a lot: the link between research and policy. But one thing that was missing in my eyes was the link between policy, the research and practice. You know, Bernard was talking about commissioning, paying a consultant to make some research. It was good to hear the policymakers are reading the reports, they are aware of what's going on. But then the question that remains for us to discuss next 2 days is the research reaching the practitioners, the youth workers? Do they have access to research? Because policy research link seems strong, established, and existing. So this is something to dwell upon for the next 2 days, actually.
thank you. Özge said in the beginning that he is the one responsible for cake and coffee, but actually now it's me. We're now going into a coffee break. Thanks a lot to our speakers for this first round. Thanks a lot to you. And enjoy your coffee. We meet here again at 4.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Ha. Wunderbar. Ja, bitte, wo immer. Nimm Platz.
Oh, big corner for us to sit with Frank in one panel, no?
Welcome back. Please find your seats again. We're ready to start. We're short on time, as everybody is aware, so we only have an hour for this. But we would like to give you a bit of an insight into the main findings of the RAY network and a bit the background of the RAY network, because as Gerhard mentioned in the welcoming, not everybody is familiar with it. There's some new faces, but of course also for those of you who are involved for some time already, it might be interesting to hear some of the main findings from different colleagues. So you see here on the stage, there is more people, even if it says only Helmut Fennes on the slide. Helmut is from the University of Innsbruck. He is the research coordinator of RAY, and he is going to introduce the colleagues and the session. Helmut.
Thank you. Yes, this here is a session actually to demonstrate that the financial resources invested in youth, in the youth field, in youth in action, is invested well. That this has effects and outcomes which are worthwhile spending money on, let's put it that way. While of course we know the question is, could it be better, is always there, and we're always there to do better and to improve our practice. I make a short introduction. We are not going to show here and present all the research findings over the last 5 years. A lot of it is somehow written here, and we're not going to repeat what we already have said. There is a more intensive report here, and there's all the documents are online on the website of the RAY website. But what we wanted to do here is to highlight some findings, specifically also from research at national level, not so much at transnational level. And this is why we have asked some of our colleagues to present some of their highlights. I want to introduce Frank Stevens from Belgium and representing the research partner of the Flemish National Agency of YINT. We have Siro here from Finland, from CIMO, who is a researcher at the same institution as the national agency, which has a research department. We have Eva Feldmann from Germany, and from the University at Munich, from the Center of Center of Applied Policy Research. Sorry, I didn't capture that. And then we have Andrej Barta from the Czech Republic, who is research partner of the Czech National Agency and comes also originally from the University of Brno, Masaryk University. Just to understand where these findings come from, a short overview of what has happened, what was done in terms of research in the past 5 years. One was the so-called standard survey that looked at effects and profiles of participants and backgrounds and all kinds of profiles of projects as well. So a kind of a very broad survey on all aspects of youth in action that was done on a continuous basis, where about 30,000 responses from all RAY network countries were collected and analyzed. This was done on a regular basis. There was a special survey on learning in youth in action in 2012. There was also a qualitative dimension and a qualitative research on learning in youth in action, specifically how do people learn through their participation in these projects. And there was a project on competence, a research project on competence development, specifically trying to validate that people actually change or develop through their participation in youth in action projects, specifically on some of the competences that were studied. These research involved as well participants of all types of youth in action projects, as well as project leaders. So this is the basic research design activity. There have been transnational analysis reports, as well as in all the different RAY network countries, national reports of the data that was collected. All these reports are online somewhere, somehow, and you can find links specifically on the homepage of RAY. There is still analysis of that data going on, because we have collected so much data, we could actually not analyze it so quickly. And specifically, one research activity presently is run by Frank and the French colleagues and others as well, and Salto Inclusion, on the question of inclusion of the participation of young people with few opportunities in RAY youth in action projects, and how they are affected specifically or significantly through their participation. Yes, so again, this is where we come from over the past 5 years, 6 years. We started with a small group of countries in 2008, 2009, which has continuously grown. And in fact, the research activities went on into 2014, because many projects that were funded still with youth in action were only finished in 2014. So the last survey of that type was in 2014. And this was, so to say, the pioneering phase. And actually only now, with 2015 and with June, now to June 2015, the new phase of research in youth in action starts. Okay, just to say how we proceed, each of my colleagues has pointed out, I forgot to mention it, Eva is here from Germany, but there was also supposed to be Hendrik Otten here. Hendrik Otten is caught in a train in Germany, not due to the strikes, that would be normal, but because of some accident on the track, and he should be here already now, but he will only make it probably in an hour or so, hopefully. In any case, but Eva kindly said she will also
replace Hendrik in what Hendrik was supposed to bring in. We have looked at what were specific highlights in these 5 countries. Actually, Özge is part of that too. This is the empty chair for Özge at a later stage, to make an intervention as well. And we will go it through a couple of rounds on main findings or interesting findings. I know what they have said they would like to present, and I try to get some system into this. And so I start out with this now. What seems evident is, since this is a European Union program, the question is, what role does Europe play in this? And Andra has mentioned that the European dimension of projects was a specific finding in his research. Maybe, Andra, you want to start out?
Thank you very much. Is it on? Is it on or is it off?
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, it's actually true. What we are working on right now is that I'm finally trying to analyze all the data for the whole period we have been looking at, which is 2009 to 2013, basically, with the exception of 2012, which Helmut didn't mention. We did also some special surveys, so we don't have the data for the standard survey for the 2012. Nevertheless, we do have heaps of data at hand, and we are working our way through it right now. One of the findings, well, apart from the impressive positive feedback during the whole period, where over 80% during each and every single of the monitored years said that they would recommend the participation in such project to their friends, and the same number says that it was an enriching experience for them. So the main finding for us was that Europe was actually the most tackled topic, and also the topic where people learned the most about. It was almost half of the participants learned something about Europe in every one of these monitored years. And it went kind of hand in hand with increasing awareness of the European values, human rights, peace and nonviolence, democracy, and so on. And also, which I find personally very interesting, with networking throughout Europe. The young people surveyed actually...
Can we keep that for a later stage?
Ah, yeah, right.
Okay. Yeah. I come to the networking later on.
Okay.
You mentioned European issues as being very dominant. I think Ciro has also something to say on this.
The most interesting data in Finland was the open questions and the interviews. And according to them, this European awareness was very important, and especially the diversity in Europe. And the main finding was that the participants felt that although they are from different cultural backgrounds, they are all the same. They struggle with the same problems. So they find themselves like all Europeans, all the same youngsters, anyway.
Thank you. Maybe you pass on the word to Frank, because Frank also made a comparison over the period 2009 to 2013, and you actually observed how the development was over the years. Can you say something about this?
Yeah. When you asked what is a specific finding in the Belgian-Flemish data, then the first thing that sprung in mind was we had a very important change in skill development over time. In 2011, because we only participated from 2011. So 2011 and 2012, the most frequently mentioned skill that was developed by the Flemish participants was foreign language skills. And since 2013, we see that foreign language skills is less frequently mentioned. And at the same time, we see that discussing political issues seriously has increased. And the main reason why we can explain this change is the kind of project that participants are involved in. In 2013, we had a very large project in Belgium, Flanders, where a lot of participants in the sample had participated in a project about the European elections. But it was staged in Flanders, in the main cities and towns of Flanders, and there was no international mobility. So a lot of people didn't speak a foreign language, and that's one of the main reasons why it has changed. And in 2014, we had a lot of exchanges with people from the Netherlands. So then you also don't speak a foreign language. There, the main objective is to try to make you understood as a Fleming towards the Dutch people. So, but it's not another language that you speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. This actually demonstrates very clearly that obviously, and we also found this out in the transnational analysis, because there we have a larger sample and there we can look at that the different activity types, project types, have different strengths or serve different effects in terms of learning, in terms of competence development. That can be read in the transnational analysis, but some are more, let's say, all-rounder projects, like the youth exchanges, are not very prominent on any of the competences developed, but very fairly evenly, and others are very strong on one and weaker on the other. So the different types of activities actually, as already is in the objectives of the different actions, have different strengths with respect to competence development. Yeah, I think, and in fact, largely, I would say, largely in line with the intentions of the specific actions. So you observed this with a smaller sample in Belgium, where you can't compare so much the actions because the sample, you observe, okay, there was more of this, and suddenly this went up and this went